In 1643, the greatest swordsman in Japanese history, Miyamoto Musashi, walked into a duel that would define his legacy forever. His opponent, Sasaki Kojiro, was known across all of Japan as the demon of the western provinces. Kojiro had a blade so long, over 3 feet, that it gave him a 4-foot striking advantage over any normal swordsman. He had killed 17 men in single combat. 17 warriors, all highly trained, all dead by his hand. Musashi arrived 4 hours late to the duel. When he finally showed up, Kojiro was furious, absolutely enraged. Historical records say he was pacing back and forth on the beach, his hand gripping and re-gripping his sword handle. His students later reported that his hands were visibly shaking. He was mentally fighting Musashi before Musashi even stepped off the boat. Kojiro had spent those 4 hours overthinking every possible scenario. What if Musashi attacks from the left? What if he uses 2 swords? What if this is a trap? What if I'm not fast enough? His mind was running 1,000 simulations simultaneously. When Musashi finally arrived, he walked slowly up the beach, calmly, almost lazily. He had carved a rough wooden sword from an oar during the boat ride over. Not even a proper bakken, just a chunk of wood shaped like a blade. Kojiro screamed at him, taunted him, called him a coward for being late. Musashi said absolutely nothing. He didn't respond, didn't react. His face was completely neutral. Kojiro drew his legendary blade, the drying pole, so named because it was as long as a laundry pole. The blade gleamed in the sunlight. He took his combat stance. Musashi simply stood there, wooden sword resting casually on his shoulder. Then, without warning, without any preparatory movement, Musashi simply moved. The fight lasted 8 seconds. Musashi struck once, a single overhead blow. Kojiro's skull shattered. He collapsed onto the beach, dead before he hit the sand. Musashi walked back to his boat without looking back. He never spoke about the duel. He never bragged. He never even mentioned Kojiro's name in his writings. Now here's what nobody tells you about that duel, the part that changes everything. Musashi didn't win because he was faster than Kojiro. Historical analysis suggests Kojiro was probably the faster swordsman technically. Musashi didn't win because he was stronger, or more skilled, or better trained. Musashi won because while Kojiro's mind was racing through 1,000 possibilities, Musashi's mind was completely empty. The Japanese have a word for this state of consciousness, mushin. It translates literally as no mind, but it doesn't mean thoughtless. It doesn't mean reckless or impulsive or stupid. It means the complete absence of overthinking that allows perfect intuitive action. And here's the part that should terrify you. In a good way, every single decision you're agonizing over right now, whether to quit your job, whether to have that difficult conversation, whether to end that relationship, whether to start that business, you already know what to do. Deep down, your intuition has already processed all the variables. Your gut already knows the answer. Your overthinking isn't protecting you from making the wrong choice. It's not making you more strategic or more thoughtful or more careful. Your overthinking is paralyzing you. It's keeping you stuck. It's the enemy, not the solution. This video will teach you the exact method Miyamoto Musashi used to eliminate overthinking entirely, not reduce it, not manage it, eliminate it. Because once you understand what he understood about the human mind, you can't go back to being someone who hesitates. If you're ready to stop overthinking and start acting with the decisiveness of a master swordsman, let's begin. The paralysis trap, why your brain betrays you. Let me show you what overthinking actually is at the neurological level and why it's killing your potential. In 1594, a young samurai named Yagyu Munenori was training under the legendary Zen master Takuan Soho at a monastery in Kyoto. Munenori was brilliant, technically flawless in every aspect of swordsmanship. His form was perfect, his strikes were precise, his footwork was textbook, but he kept losing practice duels over and over and over again. He would lose to students who were technically inferior to him, students he should have been able to defeat easily. One day, after Munenori lost his 7th consecutive practice bout, Takuan pulled him aside and asked him a simple question. "What are you thinking about during the fight?" Munenori answered honestly, "Everything, master. I'm thinking about my opponent's stance, which strike he might use next, how I should counter each possibility, whether my grip is correct, whether my back foot is positioned properly, what you will think of my performance, whether I'm breathing correctly, what my family will say if I keep losing." Takuan looked at him for a long moment, then said, "That is precisely why you lose." Here's what was happening in Munenori's brain during those duels, and I guarantee you it's the exact same thing happening in your brain right now when you're trying to make any important decision. When you overthink, your prefrontal cortex, the decision-making part of your brain located right behind your forehead, gets flooded with what neuroscientists call simultaneous scenario simulations. Researchers at Stanford University discovered that decision paralysis occurs when your brain attempts to run more than 4 scenario models at the same time. 4 scenarios. That's your cognitive limit for effective decision-making. Beyond 4 simultaneous scenarios, you're not thinking strategically anymore. You're not being careful or thorough. You're drowning in mental noise. Your decision-making system is overloaded and effectively non-functional. Yagyu Munenori was running 12 different scenario models simultaneously during his practice duels. 12! His mind was trying to predict and prepare for 12 different possible futures at once. Meanwhile, his opponents, the ones who kept defeating him, were running exactly 1 scenario model. Strike now! Guess who won those duels? This is why you can't decide what to say in that important conversation you need to have. Why you rewrite that critical email 17 times and still don't send it. Why you lie awake at 3 a.m. replaying and analyzing a conversation that happened 6 hours ago, running through alternate versions of what you could have said. You're not being thoughtful. You're not being strategic. You're not being careful. You're running too many scenario models simultaneously, and your decision-making system is completely overloaded and paralyzed. The samurai understood this phenomenon 800 years before modern neuroscience proved it was real. They called it the sickness of thinking, and they developed specific techniques to cure it. But here's the really fascinating part, the part that makes this immediately applicable to your life. Overthinking isn't actually about intelligence or conscientiousness or being detail-oriented. Those are just the excuses we tell ourselves. Overthinking is about fear. When Takuan Soho finally diagnosed Munenori's problem, he said, "You are not thinking about the duel. You are thinking about losing the duel. Every scenario your mind creates is a fantasy about failure. You are fighting phantoms instead of your actual opponent." Read that again. You are fighting phantoms instead of your actual opponent. That conversation you're avoiding? You've already had it 300 times in your head, and in every single version it goes badly. Those are phantoms, that decision you can't make. You've already imagined 50 different outcomes, and you've catastrophized 47 of them. Those are phantoms, that email you can't send. You've already written 12 drafts and imagined negative responses to all of them. Those are phantoms. You're not overthinking the reality. You're overthinking your fear of the reality. And here's the brutal truth. While you're busy fighting phantoms in your head, reality is passing you by. Opportunities are vanishing. Relationships are deteriorating. Time is running out. Kojiro lost his duel before Musashi even arrived, because he spent 4 hours fighting the phantom version of Musashi in his imagination instead of calmly preparing for the real one. The question is, how do you stop fighting phantoms and start responding to reality? Mushin, the state of no mind. In 1605, Miyamoto Musashi wrote a passage in his famous text, The Book of Five Rings, that most people read as poetry, but is actually a precise neurological instruction manual. He wrote, "Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world." That sentence sounds beautiful and philosophical, doesn't it? Almost like a meditation mantra or something you'd see on an inspirational poster. But it's not philosophy, it's neuroscience. Let me translate what Musashi actually meant in that sentence. Think lightly of yourself. Stop running internal scenario models about your own performance, your safety, your ego, your reputation, what others think of you. Think deeply of the world. Observe the external reality in front of you with total clarity and presence, without your internal narrator interfering. This is Mushin, the state of no mind, the state where your analytical overthinking mind shuts off completely and your perceptual, intuitive mind takes over. Here's exactly how it works. When Takuan Soho finally taught Yagyu Muninori the principle of Mushin after months of failed attempts, he used a very simple but powerful demonstration. Without any warning, Takuan picked up a rock and threw it directly at Muninori's head as hard as he could. Muninori dodged. Instantly, his body moved before his conscious mind even registered the threat. After the rock flew past, Takuan asked him, "How did you decide to dodge that rock?" Muninori thought for a moment, then said, I didn't decide, Master. I just moved. My body moved on its own." Takuan smiled and said, "That is Mushin. That is the mind you need in combat. That is the mind you need in life. Your brain has two completely different decision-making systems. System 1, fast, intuitive, pattern-based, unconscious. This is Mushin. This is what moved Muninori's body out of the way of that rock before he consciously registered the danger. System 2, slow, analytical, conscious, scenario modeling. This is overthinking. This is what paralyzed Muninori during his practice duels. The psychologist Daniel Kahneman won a Nobel Prize, proving that System 1 makes better decisions under pressure and uncertainty than System 2. System 2, analytical thinking, is useful for planning, for preparation, for studying something when you have unlimited time. But System 1, intuitive thinking, is superior for action, for execution, for performance under pressure. The problem is, you've trained yourself to use System 2 for absolutely everything, every conversation, every email, every decision, no matter how small. You've become addicted to analysis. You're using the wrong system for the wrong situations. Miyamoto Musashi used System 1 for action and execution. He used System 2 only for preparation and strategic planning. That's why, when Sasaki Kojiro was overthinking every possible scenario on that beach, Musashi was simply present, simply observing, simply responding to reality as it unfolded. Now, here's the critical question. How do you actually train Mushin? How do you develop the ability to shut off your analytical mind and act from pure intuition? The committed cut. Musashi's decision-making protocol, Miyamoto Musashi, had a non-negotiable rule for all of his students. He would tell them, once you draw your sword, you must strike. Any hesitation after commitment is death. This wasn't philosophy or metaphor. It was literal survival science. In 1604, Musashi fought a famous duel against the entire Yoshioka school in Kyoto, one of the most prestigious sword schools in Japan. The Yoshioka family sent their 3 best fighters against him simultaneously: Yoshioka Seijuro, Yoshioka Denshichiro, and Yoshioka Matashichiro, who was only 13 years old, but already a sword prodigy. The historical records describe what happened next. The moment Musashi drew his 2 wooden swords, he famously fought with 2 swords, 1 in each hand. He moved forward, continuously, without any pauses, without any reconsideration, without any hesitation. He killed all 3 brothers in under 2 minutes. The Yoshioka school never recovered from that defeat. They closed their doors permanently shortly after. Here's the specific technique Musashi used in that fight, and it's the exact same technique you need to eliminate overthinking in your own life. The 5-second rule of committed action. The principle is devastatingly simple. The moment you identify what needs to be done, the moment your intuition recognizes the correct action, you have exactly 5 seconds to physically initiate that action. Not complete it, not finish it, just start it. 5 seconds, that's your window. Why exactly 5 seconds? Neuroscientists at MIT discovered that the window between decision and action paralysis is 5.2 seconds on average. After approximately 5 seconds, your prefrontal cortex begins generating alternative scenarios, and overthinking begins to flood your system. Before 5 seconds, intuitive action. After 5 seconds, analytical paralysis. Musashi understood this instinctively, centuries before brain imaging technology existed. Watch how he applied this principle throughout his entire life. In combat, the moment he identified an opening in an opponent's defense, he struck immediately. No hesitation, no second-guessing, no, maybe I should wait for a better opportunity. He committed and executed in his writing. When he decided to write the Book of 5 Rings, he went to a cave called Reigando and wrote the entire manuscript in one continuous session over several weeks. No editing during the process, no going back to revise earlier chapters, complete committed action from start to finish. In his strategic decisions, at the Battle of Sekigahara, one of the most important battles in Japanese history, Musashi had to choose which side to fight for. He analyzed the battlefield positions, made his decision, and committed within minutes. He didn't agonize for days. He didn't create elaborate pro-con lists. 5 seconds, then commitment. This is what Musashi called the principle of the committed cut. In sword fighting, once you commit to a strike, you cannot change your mind mid-swing. If you try to stop or alter your strike halfway through, you leave yourself completely vulnerable and you die. The same is true in life. Here's how you apply the committed cut principle starting today. That difficult conversation you've been avoiding for 3 weeks. The moment you feel the recognition that it needs to happen, that's your intuition speaking. You have 5 seconds. Walk over. Hey, can we talk about something? Your body takes over from there. That email you've rewritten 9 times? 5 seconds. Hit send on version 2, not version 17. That career decision you've been agonizing over? 5 seconds. Submit the application, make the phone call, send the message. You're not eliminating thinking. You're eliminating the overthinking that happens after you already know what the right action is. Musashi called this striking from the void. Your conscious, analytical mind goes completely quiet, and your trained intuition acts with perfect clarity. But here's the absolutely critical part that most people miss. This only works if you've done the preparation. How Musashi built unshakable intuition. Here's what most people completely misunderstand about Miyamoto Musashi. They think he was spontaneous, instinctive, that he just trusted his gut, and everything worked out because he was naturally talented. Completely wrong. Musashi fought over 60 lethal duels during his lifetime. 60 times he faced an opponent where one mistake meant death. But here's what people don't know. Before each duel, Musashi spent days, sometimes weeks, studying his opponent's technique. He would travel to watch them train. He would talk to people who had seen them fight. He would analyze their patterns, their preferred strikes, their weaknesses, their tendencies when pressured. He would study obsessively, analytically, methodically. Then, during the actual duel, he would forget all of it. This is the paradox of Mushin. You prepare exhaustively, load your intuition with patterns so that you can act without conscious thinking during execution. Takuan Soho explained it with a beautiful metaphor. The mind must be like a mirror. It reflects everything in front of it with perfect clarity, but it holds on to nothing. Translation: during preparation, you load your System 1 intuitive mind with patterns, techniques, and strategic information. During execution, you clear your System 2 analytical mind completely and let your intuition respond to reality. Musashi's training method had 3 distinct phases. Phase 1, pattern absorption, preparation mode. Musashi would study an opponent or a situation until he could predict their movements unconsciously. Not consciously, where he had to think about it, but unconsciously, where his body simply knew. Modern neuroscientists call this process chunking. Your brain compresses repeated patterns and information into automatic recognition protocols. Example: a chess grandmaster doesn't consciously analyze every single piece and possibility during a match. They recognize patterns they've seen 10,000 times before. Their intuition moves instantly because their preparation was thorough. Musashi spent approximately 10,000 hours practicing sword technique before his first serious duel. 10,000 hours of pattern absorption. Phase 2, scenario rehearsal, mental simulation. Before a duel, Musashi would mentally rehearse the fight. Not to plan every single move, that would be overthinking, but to familiarize his nervous system with the pressure of the situation. He would visualize entering the space, drawing his sword, the weight of the weapon, the sound of his opponent's breathing, the feeling of adrenaline. Modern Olympic athletes call this visualization training or mental rehearsal. Musashi called it zanshin, remaining mind. Harvard neuroscience researchers discovered that mental rehearsal activates the exact same neural pathways as physical practice. Your brain cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. By mentally rehearsing scenarios, Musashi was literally training his brain to respond automatically when those scenarios occurred in reality. Phase 3, committed execution, Mushin mode. The moment an actual duel began, Musashi stopped thinking entirely. His analytical mind went silent. His body responded to reality. not to his predictions, not to his plans, but to what was actually happening in front of him. Yagyu Munenori once described watching Musashi fight. His eyes were empty, like he wasn't even present in his own body, but his movements were perfect, precise. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. It was like watching water flow around rocks. This is the state you're trying to reach in your own life. Not thoughtlessness, not recklessness, thought-freeness, your intuition, loaded with thorough preparation, responding fluidly to reality without interference from your analytical mind. That's Mushin. But here's the hard truth. Your brain will resist this with everything it has. Why your mind fights against Mushin. Here's the problem you're going to face immediately. Your brain is evolutionarily designed to overthink. Evolution didn't optimize human beings for decisive action. It optimized us for survival through excessive caution and threat analysis. Your ancestors who paused and carefully considered every possible scenario before acting, they lived longer than the ones who acted impulsively and quickly. They had more children. They passed on their genes. You are the descendant of overthinkers. It's in your DNA. But here's what's different now. You're not running from predators anymore. You're not making life or death survival decisions about whether that rustling in the bushes is a tiger. You're navigating complex social, professional, and personal situations where overthinking is the predator, not the solution. When Yagyu Munenori first tried to practice Mushin under Takuan Soho's guidance, he failed continuously for 6 months. One day, frustrated and exhausted, he said to Takuan, "Master, every time I try to empty my mind, it fills with even more thoughts, more fear, more doubt, more analysis. The harder I try to achieve no mind, the louder my mind becomes." Takuan responded, "You are trying to force the river to stop flowing. That is impossible and foolish. Instead, learn to let the river flow without attaching to any single drop of water." Translation: you cannot stop thoughts from arising. That's not how the human brain works. You can only stop yourself from attaching to those thoughts, from believing them, from following them, from letting them control your actions. Here are the 3 specific obstacles you will face when training Mushin. Obstacle 1. The internal narrator. This is the voice inside your head that constantly explains and comments on everything you're experiencing. I should probably say this. What if they think I'm stupid? This conversation is going badly. I'm embarrassing myself right now. The narrator pretends to be helping you by providing analysis and commentary, but actually it's just adding noise and preventing intuitive action. Musashi's solution? Name it. The moment you hear the narrator's voice, mentally label it. Narrator. This simple act creates psychological distance between you and the thought. You stop identifying with it. It becomes something you observe rather than something you are. Obstacle 2. Outcome attachment. This is your obsession with controlling results and avoiding failure. I need this conversation to go perfectly. What if I make the wrong choice? What if this doesn't work? Outcome attachment creates the fear that fuels overthinking. Musashi's solution: focus exclusively on correct action, never on results. He called this principle Muichimotsu, nothing in the hand. You hold your goal lightly. You're moving toward it, but you're not attached to it. You cannot control outcomes. You can only control your actions, so put all your focus there. Obstacle 3. Analysis paralysis. This is the endless mental loop of scenario modeling. But what if X happens? Or what if Y happens instead? Or what about Z? Your brain can generate infinite scenarios. If you try to plan for all of them, you will never act. Musashi's solution, the 5-second rule. The moment you recognize the correct action, you have 5 seconds to initiate movement. After 5 seconds, you're no longer deciding. You're procrastinating with the illusion of strategic thinking. Here's the truth that took me years to accept. These obstacles never completely disappear. Even Miyamoto Musashi, at 60 years old, and after 61 consecutive undefeated duels, said that his mind still generated thoughts during combat. The difference was this: he no longer attached to those thoughts. He let them arise and pass like clouds in the sky. He observed them without believing them, without obeying them. That's the skill you're developing. Not the elimination of thought, but the elimination of attachment to thought. From overthinker to decisive actor. In 1643, the same year as his legendary duel with Sasaki Kojiro, Miyamoto Musashi wrote something in the Book of 5 Rings that most people read as a throwaway philosophical line. You must understand that there is more than one path to the top of the mountain. He wasn't talking about sword technique. He wasn't talking about strategy. He was talking about transformation. Here's the truth that I need you to understand before you start this journey. You will not eliminate overthinking overnight. This is not a quick fix. This is not a productivity hack. This is an identity shift, a complete transformation from someone who thinks their way into action to someone who acts their way into clarity. The timeline looks approximately like this: days 1 to 30, the awareness phase. For the first 30 days, you're simply going to start noticing how often you overthink. Every hesitation, every rewritten email, every avoided conversation, every 3 a.m. mental spiral, replaying a conversation from 8 hours ago. You're not trying to fix it yet. You're not judging yourself for it. You're just seeing it clearly, probably for the first time in your life. This is harder than it sounds. Most people have been overthinking for so long, they don't even realize they're doing it. It feels normal. It feels like being responsible or being thorough. Awareness is the first step. Days 31 to 60, the application phase. This is where you start applying the 5-second rule consistently, not perfectly. You will fail constantly, but consistently. You'll send the email. You'll start the conversation. You'll make the decision. You'll notice that your accuracy rate, the percentage of times your quick, intuitive decision was correct, is around 70%. That's completely normal. That's expected. Here's what matters. 70% correct decisions made quickly is infinitely more valuable than 95% correct decisions made so slowly that opportunities vanish while you're deciding. Musashi said, "There is timing in everything. Timing and strategy cannot be mastered without a great deal of practice." This is your practice phase. Days 61 or 90. The automaticity phase. Somewhere around day 60 to day 90, something shifts. Decisive action becomes your default setting instead of your effortful override. You still feel fear. You still notice thoughts arising, but you no longer pause. Your body moves before your mind can interfere with analysis. This is Mushin. Yagyu Munenori described his own transformation like this. For 6 months, I tried desperately to practice no mind, and I failed constantly, sometimes dozens of times in a single day. Then one day, during a practice duel, I suddenly realized I hadn't thought a single conscious thought for 10 minutes. My body had simply known what to do. It was like waking from a dream. That's the moment you're working toward. Not confidence. Confidence still involves thought. Not fearlessness. Fearlessness is delusion, but the automatic execution of correct action regardless of whatever internal noise your mind generates. And here's what happens when you reach that state. Other people become genuinely unnerved by your composure, because while they're drowning in their own overthinking, second-guessing themselves, explaining and justifying their decisions, you're simply responding to reality with clean, decisive action. Musashi didn't intimidate his opponents with his technical skill, though his skill was extraordinary. He intimidated them with his stillness, with his complete lack of doubt, with the way he could stand in front of death itself, with a mind like a still pond. That's what you're building, the death of the overthinker. Let me bring this full circle to where we started, when Miyamoto Musashi stepped off that boat to face Sasaki Kojiro on the beach at Ganryu Island. He wasn't fearless. Historical records from his attendance mention that he vomited twice during the boat ride. Twice. He was physically sick from stress. He was human. He felt fear just like you do. But the moment he stepped onto that beach, something changed. His mind went completely silent. Kojiro, despite being technically superior in many ways, faster, younger, with a longer reach, had already lost the duel before it started. Because Kojiro's mind was racing through 1,000 scenarios, and Musashi's mind was empty. The fight lasted 8 seconds. Here's what I need you to understand, and I mean really understand, at a level deeper than intellectual agreement. Overthinking isn't protecting you from mistakes. It's not making you more strategic. It's not making you more careful or more responsible. Overthinking is preventing you from living. That decision you're agonizing over right now, the one that keeps you awake at 3 a.m., the one you've made pro-con lists about, the one you've discussed with 7 different people hoping someone will just tell you what to do. You already know what to do. Your intuition has already processed all the relevant patterns. Your gut already knows the answer. Your overthinking is just interference. It's just noise. It's just fear wearing the mask of strategy. The method is simple. Prepare exhaustively. Study the situation. Load your intuition with patterns and information. Do your homework. Then execute without thinking. 5 seconds, committed action. Let your trained intuition respond to reality as it unfolds. This isn't recklessness. This isn't impulsiveness. This is the highest form of intelligence. Miyamoto Musashi spent 60 years perfecting this principle. You won't master it in 90 days, maybe not in 900 days, but you can begin the transformation right now. Today, this moment. The question is, are you ready to kill the overthinker inside you? Because that's what this actually is. That's what this transformation requires. The death of your analytical self. The birth of your decisive self. Musashi didn't win that duel because he outthought Kojiro. He won because he stopped thinking entirely and let his prepared, trained body respond to reality with perfect intuitive action. That's the state you're capable of reaching, not someday in the distant future. Today, the next time you feel that familiar paralysis, that endless mental loop of what if, what if, what if, remember this. You have 5 seconds. 5 seconds to act before your brain floods you with phantom scenarios. 5 seconds to step into Mushin. 5 seconds to become the person who doesn't hesitate. Kojiro hesitated. He overthought. He fought phantoms in his imagination. Musashi didn't. You know which one walked off that beach alive. If this video fundamentally changed how you think about decision-making and action, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. The next video will teach you how to eliminate fear entirely using another samurai principle that's even more powerful than this one. And tell me in the comments, what decision have you been overthinking? What will you commit to doing in the next 5 seconds? Because here's the reality. Every person who watches this video will have one of two reactions. Most will think, interesting concept, and return to overthinking tomorrow. They'll wait for the perfect moment. They'll analyze a bit more. They'll stay exactly where they are. But a few of you, maybe 5%, will actually apply this. You'll use the 5-second rule today. You'll make that call, send that message, have that conversation, and your life will change. Not because the technique is magic, but because decisive action creates momentum, and momentum creates transformation. Musashi didn't become legendary by thinking about duels. He became legendary by showing up and striking. Remember Musashi's final lesson. The mind that hesitates is the mind that loses. The choice is yours right now. If you've made it this far, thank you for your time and attention. I'll see you in the next one.